Welcome back to the second video in the draft scouting series for the 2019 NFL Draft. We looked at quarterbacks last week. If you haven't checked that out yet, go do that. It's Brian and myself once again. This time we're looking at defensive line, more specifically edge rushers, pass rushers. Probably the biggest pass rushing class we've had in a while, and this is probably also the best unit of the entire draft class. So I'm going to get right into it. I'm going to do my top 5 the way we did last time and then ask Brian for his opinion. Number 1, I have Nick Bosa out of Ohio State. No surprises here. He's 6'4", 266. He has 33-inch arms, and he ran a 4.79 40. He has veteran technique. He plays like a 30-year-old in the NFL. Quick, he's got great get-off. Exceptionally disciplined in his assignments. He understands pursuit angles and how to utilize them. Mindset of a veteran. Instincts of a pass rusher. Technically sound. Uses his hands and feet really well. He's a complete prospect. Plug and play. He can go from day one and play at an elite level in the pros. He's very explosive and works with good pad level. He has a refined set of moves that make him look a lot more experienced than he actually is. His arms are somewhat on the shorter end with the 33 inches. He's not exceptionally physically gifted. Doesn't have that top elite length or the top elite arm length, which might lead to some problems with larger offensive tackles in the NFL. He has the highest floor of the class, but also one of the lower ceilings compared to other prospects. He's not elite in run defense yet due to the lack of weight and physicality, and he can eventually get moved by double teams every once in a while. I have an early first-round grade on him. I'm projecting him to be a top 3 pick. Looks more and more likely that Kyler Murray is going to be the first overall pick, but I would be very surprised if Bosa came out of the top 3. He's the best prospect on my board in this draft, and I believe a lot of people share that. My pro comparison for him is somewhat unsurprisingly Joey Bosa. I think they're very similar. He's a very similar kind of player, and if that's what you're kind of expecting out of Nick Bosa, I think it's a very sound investment. So, Brian, what do you think?
Yeah, I think you hit a bunch of really great points. I'm going to be honest, Nick Bosa, he's so good that he made all of these other edge rushers look worse to me. Like, I was so nitpicky afterwards because he really does everything so well. You're right that he still has room for improvement, but his instincts, his quickness, his hand technique is just all so perfect. He's such a physical force, such a physical presence and a disruptor on a snap-by-snap basis that it's really, like you said, it's like watching a pro go up against a bunch of boys. It's really kind of unfair watching him. And there's a lot of other talented edge rushers in this draft, but Nick Bosa is just head and shoulders above the rest. I'm with you. As of right now, he's my number 1 prospect as well. And I don't think there's a single team in the league that couldn't use a player like Nick Bosa. I don't care if you're a team like the Broncos or Chargers. He's not falling there anyway, but where you have a dual set of pass rushers, he's the type of player where he can really fit into any scheme. You can kind of line him up on multiple areas on the defensive line. He's going to be a stud. You're right about the low ceiling. He might not quite reach superstar levels, but he's going to be a very high-level player for years to come.
All right, number 2, I have Josh Allen out of Kentucky. 6'5", 262, 33.5-inch arms, and he ran a 4.63 40. He's athletic and explosive, more athletic than Bosa. He can take over a game with the splash plays he makes. He dominates with speed and good, clean technique on his moves, and his agility is off the charts. He can speed rush, he can dip and rip, and utilizes his flexors in his body very well. Hips, natural pass rusher. The first thing a coach will look at, the first thing in a pass rusher. If you have nothing else, you gotta have hips. That's the one thing. And Josh Allen has hips. He can flip his hips and he can make people miss. Great in pursuit. He's a secure tackler. Off the field plus on him. He's a leader. He makes an impact with his character. Gonna lead the locker room from day one and be a generally good influence in your organization. He plays to his strength and he knows how to do it very well. He uses his hands the right way, and he can even drop into coverage on zone blitzes, so there's a plus for his versatility there. He's not currently having the most robust frame in the class. He can get physically overpowered in the ground game. Technique on his hand use could be a little bit more consistent sometimes. Should probably play outside linebacker in a 34. I'm kind of questioning his 43 fit still because he's not too versatile as a defensive lineman. You should line him up inside of the 5 technique because of those run fit problems, and he might get blown off the line of scrimmage by a double team. I also have an early first-round grade on him. He's a top 5 pick projected to me, and my pro comparison for him is going to be Von Miller. He's a bit larger, but kind of that same skill set with the incredible flexibility and speed rush moves.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think you really hit the nail on the head. I don't know if I could say much of it better myself. Like his versatility, and I really like his instincts, whether it's when the ball leaves the quarterback's hands, he's always getting his hands up. He's breaking up passes a lot. He's a pretty strong physical presence in general. A little inconsistent. There were times where I felt like he was taken out of the game, and then other times where there'd be 5, 6, 7 plays in a row where he was by far and away the best player on the field. So would like to definitely see him get a little more consistent. Again, I'm watching him right after Nick Bosa, just didn't quite feel that same explosiveness. But he's a really good athlete, very versatile. I'm not quite sure if he's, got the physical abilities to really cover these really talented tight ends in the NFL, but at least he has some experience kind of working in zone coverage, so that's really good. I'm not quite as high on him as everybody else is. I know he's kind of a consensus top 5 pick. I have him more as like a mid-first rounder. Still a very talented player, and I know that's kind of an unpopular opinion. Still think he's a really good, well-rounded pass rusher. Not a lot of flaws in his game. Just, again, wasn't quite as impressed as most people were when I watched him.
All right, we might get into the first controversy here. Number 3, I got Montez Sweat out of Mississippi State. 6'6", 260, 35 and 3/4 inch arms, 4.41 40-yard dash. That is wide receiver times. That is faster than Odell Beckham. He has an optimal frame and length for a pass rusher. Top end speed and quickness. He can convert that speed into power at the point of attack. Freakish athlete. He has active hands, and he coordinates his moves really well. He's a hard worker, second effort, good closer. He has very good instinct for pursuit and the angle of attack in the run game. He's not the most flexible guy. He's a little bit stiff in the hips sometimes. Technique is not as refined as you want it to be, and he needs to expand his moveset. He should also gain some weight and grow into his frame to play the run better. He's currently giving up over 70 pounds to most NFL tackles, and he can get knocked around on some gap runs and the counter plays. I have a mid-first round grade on him. I'm projecting him to go in the top 15 because of his upside, and my pro comparison is to Davion Clowney of the Texans.
I'm sorry to disappoint. No controversy here. He's actually my 3rd ranked edge rusher also. Our list is pretty much exactly the same. My only issue with him now, and I'm going to even call it an issue, is recently the news came out about his heart condition. I'm not sure how serious that is. I'm not a doctor. I know not too many details are out, which is for the best. As long as he's able to report and play, that's all that should really matter. But I know that's something that needs to be monitored, so I wish him the best. I hope that doesn't end up impacting what could be a great career for him, because you're right, he's just a really explosive player. His second effort was really noticeable, too. There wasn't many players in this draft that I noticed that play with just as much intensity and effort, and you can really notice that even in games where maybe the score is a little bit more out of reach. He didn't constantly really beat double teams, but he does have just kind of the explosiveness to break through occasionally, and his top speed isn't very fast. Again, he's very quick and explosive, but he doesn't get to a super fast high speed on the field at least, so it might be an issue when it comes to him going up against a guy like a Russell Wilson or a Cam Newton or a Kyler Murray, some of these more mobile quarterbacks. But still, really like that the effort that he plays with. It's very obvious that he's a very hard worker. Definitely needs to be refined a little bit, but I think you, again, really hit the nail on the head with a lot of what you said about him. I think he's going to be a very good player. I also have kind of a mid-late first round grade on him.
All right, good that we agree on that, I guess. Number 4, I got Clelin Ferrell out of Clemson, 6'4", 264, 34 and 1/8 inch arms. There's no 40-yard time for him, at least given from the combine. He has a good frame and long arms. He has an elite get-off. This is what jumped off the tape for me. His quickness on the first step is crazy. He routinely moves before the offensive lineman does. And if he does that, he can win on the first step and get to the quarterback untouched with his perfect timing. Slippery pass rusher. He uses the dip, the spin move, and the sink and seal move to get out of a lot of blocks and disengage really quickly. He takes good angles in his rush and is very elusive. Detects and attacks the weak shoulder and hand of the offensive tackle. Very, very important, the recognition there. He sets a strong edge and plays physical in the run game. He sticks his shoulder into the kick-out blocks and tries to set a tough edge. Now, the coordination of his feet and hands sometimes needs a little bit of improvement. He does lack some aspects of the clean technique and fluidity. When engaging a block, it looks a little bit stiff sometimes. Not the most flexible in the open field. His lateral motion is limited. Doesn't change direction as quickly as you might want him to, so you don't want him to really guard gaps. He should develop more sudden and violent hands to aid his speed rush, even though he's already gotten pretty far, but the coordination is kind of a point of improvement there. Some coaching needs to be done, but he can get up to an elite level. I have a late first round rate on him, projecting him to also go in the first round, somewhere in the middle probably, and my pro comparison for him is Robert Quinn.
We are 4 for 4 so far because he's number 4 on my list as well. And I really just feel like you're taking my notes and then just making them 10 times better, because I pretty much, again, agree with everything you said. His first step is so quick, so explosive. It really jumped off the screen immediately. Like you said, sometimes it felt like he just was listening in on, the offensive coordinator and the play calling, knowing exactly when the ball is going to be snapped. But his football IQ could use a lot of work. He's really raw. Sometimes he takes some poor angles on tackles, and also sometimes he bites on some read options, bites on some play action. Sometimes he just seems like he doesn't really know what's going on the field. And I feel like that's one of those things that is tough to teach, but at the same time, you can learn it just with more repetition. He's still a pretty young guy, was only a junior, so he has one of the highest ceilings in this class. Like, again, the explosive first step, as well as just some really active hands and a nice wide array of pass rushing moves. I also have kind of the similar grade to you, mid-late first round grade on him, and I think that immediately he'll impact as a situational pass rusher, and if with the right coaching staff, he puts the right tools together, he could end up being an elite edge rusher in this league.
All right, 4 for 4. I'm curious if we can get the fifth one the same as well. So I have Brian Burns out of FSU, 6'5", 249. You have him?
No, I do not. That's our only difference.
All right, cool. Well, that's interesting at least. 33 and 7/8 inch arms, and he ran a 4.5 340. His athleticism is off the charts. He got explosive speed and quickness, flexible, and can bend. I said it before, but hips, very, very important. He has a broad set of moves which he can still keep refining. Very, very coachable, high upside, good character. Maintains his balance and force when he's dipping his hips and shoulders, and doesn't get knocked off and kind of pushed around the quarterback a lot. In offensive line jargon, we talk about the pancake, the defensive line pancake, when both tackles lead their defensive ends all the way around and they bump together and back at the quarterback. He doesn't do that because he can keep his balance. He is not yet an NFL caliber run defender. He's too light. He should gain at least 20 pounds, probably more. No elite strength and power. Gonna have difficulties in the run game. He will give up ground. Can't stuff gaps. Can't hold a double team at the line of scrimmage in the NFL. He's mostly a pure 7 and 9 technique. Should play outside linebacker in a 34. Most of his stats shouldn't come with his hand in the dirt, with him having some kind of run fit and having to take on an offensive lineman directly. I have an early second round grade on him. Because the class is so good, I'm projecting him to go late in the first or early in the second. My pro comparison for him is Vic Beasley.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good comparison overall. He, like you said, really good athlete, really smooth. At times, he makes things look really effortless. He does a really nice job of kind of just like manipulating his upper body to kind of get past linemen. They don't always know exactly what he's going to do. So he's a very smooth player that sometimes makes it look easier than it is. But at the same time, my main issue was sometimes watching him, it just didn't look like the effort was there. You mentioned not a lot of strength, and sometimes it just felt like he was completely taken out of plays. The physicality just wasn't there on plays, and I get it. Maybe the play wasn't being run in his direction, so he kind of felt like taking the play off. But in the end, you want a guy who's really kind of physically wearing down these lines, even if the play isn't necessarily being geared towards them. So I'm not quite as high on him as you are. I still think that he has a lot of upside. Think some of these guys, they just end up not quite putting in as much effort, especially as the season goes on and they're not a great team. Florida State wasn't a great team, so I can't completely knock him for that. If he goes to the right coaching and he's, kind of ends up playing with full effort all the time, he could end up being a very nice pass rusher. So I don't think it's crazy at all to put him at number 5. I have Jachai Polite from Florida. I was a huge fan of his. He honestly kind of reminded me of a little bit like a poor man's Cleland Ferrell, in that he, again, is a very explosive pass rusher, times his first step really well, and his speed rush could just be something really special, the way that he kind of got around these tackles on a regular basis. But on the flip side, he, still also has a limited tackling range, looked a little raw. He tried a spin move a few times, didn't quite work, and he really doesn't have much physical strength at all when it comes to, utilizing it, at least leveraging it right. He tended to be out-muscled a lot, especially I watched him against Georgia, and I watched him against LSU, so some big physical offensive lines, and he was taken out. But I do think that, similar to Cleland Ferrell, he could be a situational pass rusher immediately, and if he ends up kind of watching some more film, getting in the film more, getting in more reps, and putting together an all-around game, he could end up being a real nice player for a team in this draft.
So, I also heard about Polite. I've looked at him and seen this film, but a little bit of a concern for me is the questions about his character. And that's always a big thing for me looking at prospects. Yeah. I've heard a couple of teams have taken him off their draft boards entirely, and I'm not going to blame him because I'm very particular about that stuff as well, which I'm going to say just played a little bit of a role of him not being in my top 5. Talent-wise, he definitely could be. He's a little bit on the smaller end, but he's got elite speed and a lot of talent to be working with. But he needs to make better decisions in his life, and he needs to demonstrate that he's really that team guy. So we'll see how it turns out. I'm not taking a risk on him if I got these 5 still on the board because I believe that their value is just as good or better. Yeah, but I think we agreed a lot on this.
Yeah, no, I was honestly unaware of those character issues. That wasn't something I had looked into. So you bringing that up would definitely move him down my rankings a little bit because I agree that you don't want to take a risk like that unless the player is out of this world special.
Right, so we agreed on quite a lot as opposed to quarterbacks. I believe this is less of a controversy, which also speaks for the controversy, I guess, in the quarterbacks class and how uncertain that is.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, again, there's a lot of really talented guys here. I think that Nick Bosa, Josh Allen are basically the consensus top 2. Now, I do have to. I'll ask you: do you have any maybe guys that are flying a little more under the radar? Maybe guys that are being seen as 3rd, 4th, 5th round guys that you think could end up making a bigger impact that you would maybe consider a sleeper?
Not really. I believe this defensive end class is so top heavy, and the guys that we got at the top are really the top guys. In some positions that tends to occur more than others, and usually defensive end or specifically pass rusher is not that type of position because you can evaluate a lot of technique, and that makes a lot of the impact that actually turns out to be the contribution of that player. So I believe we're pretty close to this. I guess this also goes to show that our lists were very similar, and a lot of other people's lists are looking very similar as well, and that tends to go into the correct direction then as well.
That definitely makes sense. I will say there is one player I like, Zach Allen out of Boston College. Haven't really seen him being mocked really higher. I know that he was kind of ranked around the 100, 150, but he's a player I like. He's a big guy, 6'4", 280, but he's surprisingly quick for his size. He has some really strong hands and just seemed really technically sound. Kind of was breaking through tackles multiple ways, going inside, outside. Really think he could be a really nice fit in a 3-4, especially as maybe an end. And so just thought I'd throw out his name out there. I know he's not being talked about as one of these top guys, and he's definitely not quite on the level of any of those top guys we mentioned, but I do think that he could end up being a nice steal for a team if he ends up falling to them in the late 3rd, maybe the 4th round.
A guy who would work as a 34 defensive end, I probably wouldn't have even really considered for this list. I was specifically looking at edge rushers. That's also why I didn't really look at Rashawn Gary, for example, for this list. I consider to be a 43 end or a 43 3 technique probably, or a defensive end in the 34. Okay. Not really someone who's going to line up outside of tight ends that much.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That makes sense to me. I used the Draft Network, which is a great website, just clicked their edge position and went down the list. So in the end, we maybe we'll see some of these guys in another episode.
Yeah, I mean, that's right. So you got any specific projections already? Because this is the very top of the draft. Do you think Bosa and Allen are going to?
I think Nick Bosa is going to. If he's not going to fall past 2. If the Cardinals do decide to take Kyler Murray, the San Francisco 49ers, they will land Nick Bosa. As for Josh Allen, I'm not sure of a specific team, but I do think based on just kind of the way everyone's talking about him, really kind of depends on where quarterbacks go, but I do think he'll end up being a top 5 pick. I don't see how he'd end up falling past the Raiders. I mean, if he ends up falling to the Raiders, with the way he's being projected again, just because I know that I'm a little lower than a lot of people, but I know in general he's a consensus top 5 pick at a position that the Raiders really need. I'm not really sure why the Raiders would end up taking a quarterback. I know there's some rumors there, but I think they'll end up sticking with Carr, and he wouldn't fall past that. What about you?
Well, if the Raiders don't take a quarterback, then they will very likely take Allen. I believe the Raiders had the worst passer in the league last year after trading Khalil Mack, and they desperately need a replacement. I think Allen can do it. And about Bosa, after the Niners have traded for D Ford, I'm not quite as sure about this anymore. The thing is, okay, here's how it's going to probably work from the 49ers perspective. If Kyler Murray is available at 2, then you trade down because you get massive value. And if the Cardinals or someone else at 1 takes Kyler Murray and you really want Bosa, you take him. But I've also heard a lot about Quinn and Williams actually at the 49ers because that inside defensive line, inside passer is also very valuable. And I think the Jets would be happy with Nick Bosa, obviously, but they'd also be happy with Quinn Williams. I've heard people predicting the 49ers to go cornerback as high as 2. And I'm not necessarily sure if I believe that a guy like Baker or Greedy Williams is worth a second overall pick with that defensive end class. Bosa is probably the correct pick, but there might be some talks about other stuff because now that edge position isn't necessarily the biggest need. You might also trade down and pick a receiver in the middle or bottom of the first round.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And I mean, you'd know better than I would. I know you follow the 49ers more closely than I do. In my opinion, though, Bosa is the type of player that you really don't pass up on. I like D Ford. I think he's a very good player, but Bosa seems like a special player, especially in a class, again, that we keep talking about how loaded it is. The fact that he just kind of sticks out above the rest makes me think that he really does need to just, if the Niners have him there, I don't think they can pass up on him. But at the same time, unless it's a franchise quarterback, I'm never against trading back to acquire more draft capital, especially when you can get extra second rounders or future first rounders. That's just more good players you can put on your team. So I think either one makes sense.
I mean, you might be able to go back and, especially if Murray's available at 2, you could probably get the value that would give you like a Ferrell and maybe a DK Metcalf or Keith Brown, both in the first round, which I wouldn't necessarily mind. That would be a pretty good value. Yeah. If the Cardinals do take Bosa, you trade back for sure. If they take Murray, then you have your decisions to make on who you want. You got the best players on the board still available. But we can maybe do a mock draft at some point, like maybe a week or 2 before the draft, and kind of see, measure our accuracy once we actually get there. But yeah, it was great having you. Top 5 edge rushers. Let me know your opinion in the comments. Any wildly differing scouting reports, I'll be happy to look at some other guys. If you got some sleeper suggestions, I'll have a look into that. But I know Brian's also there answering some questions in the comment section, so if you got any, just leave them right there. And thank you all for watching. Please leave a like on the video. Subscribe to Beyond Football. Also go over to MadMen Scouting, MadMen Sports. That's Brian's channel. Doing a lot of good work over there, so subscribe to him as well. You can check out his Twitter and also mine. Links are in the description. And we'll see you in the next one.